Hi all, my name is Carson Cleveland. My presentation today will be focused on Robert Cialdini's 7 Principles of Influence and highlighting a few of the ways that networking, being a giver, and the Heidi Roizen case study are interconnected with these principles. The first principle we will cover today is reciprocation, which is the concept that people tend to repay in kind. In Give and Take by Adam Grant, we learned that networkers who consistently give reap the benefits of reciprocation by building more trust among their peers and therefore gaining more help from them in their work groups. Grant's example of George Meyer with his expedition behavior on the set of SNL perfectly demonstrates the principle of reciprocation in action. While working in the Darwinian environment of SNL, Meyer essentially did his co-writers a favor by saving his best work for less coveted guests instead of high-profile stars like Madonna. This led to reciprocation in the form of goodwill instead of envy from his coworkers. Now let's move on to the second principle, liking, which is centered around the idea that people are naturally inclined to like and consequently help people who also like them. In the Heidi Roizen case study, we see how Heidi effectively utilizes this principle. By investing time in getting to know people, Heidi was able to develop several key relationships with the leaders in the technology industry. Based on the positive relationships and repertoire she had built with these leaders, Heidi was able to leverage her network for the betterment of her career and the careers of those around her. We see an example of this through Heidi's relationship with Vincent Pluvinat, who she met through their children attending the same school. After this initial connection, Heidi, with her friendly demeanor, went on to become good friends with Vincent and his wife. This positive relationship with Pluvinat certainly played a role in Heidi being requested and agreeing to join the board of Pluvinat's company just a few months after their initial meeting. Now let's move on to the third principle, social proof, which is the tendency for people to follow the lead of similar others. For this principle, I want to emphasize how diverse networking can serve as a shield against the potentially negative ramifications of this principle. In How to Build Your Network by Brian Uzzi and Shannon Dunlap, we learned that highly diverse networks can help you develop more complete, creative, and unbiased views on issues. We also learned that when you build a network that is too greatly rooted in the self-similarity principle, you restrict your access to discrepant information, which is critical to both creativity and problem solving. Now, this all links back to social proof because this principle is grounded on the understanding that persuasion can be extremely effective when it comes from your peers. Therefore, it is advisable to surround yourself with a diverse peer group, allowing you to avoid creating echo chambers in your network and instead have a network that is diverse and dynamic, therefore making it much harder for you to fall victim to social proof. Now let's move on to the fourth principle, authority, which simply states that people are more naturally inclined to listen to experts and people of power. Knowing this, let's again turn to what we learned in How to Build Your Network and the Lisa Bristol example, which showcased how a diverse network catapulted Lisa into a position of authority. In this example, Lisa was able to leverage her diverse network, which comprises of many people whose expertise and positions differed from her own. The information Lisa received through her network spurred her own creative problem solving, and she soon earned a reputation for identifying promising innovations. Lisa did not have to change her work style or develop entirely new skill sets. Instead, she utilized her network to turn what she already knew into power. This earned Lisa prestige within the industry and allowed her to take full advantage of the influence that comes with authority. Now let's move on to the fifth principle, scarcity, which is based on the concept that it's simply human instinct to covet resources that are perceived as scarce or valuable. In the Heidi Roizen case, we see how Heidi organically develops and utilizes this principle. By only choosing to leverage her network when the connection would clearly benefit both parties and managing the number of times she would tap into her network each year, Heidi actively develops a sense of scarcity with regards to requests. Heidi demonstrates this principle with her friend Jeff Rakes, a top executive at Microsoft. Heidi goes on to explain how she turned down a request to connect one of her portfolio companies with Jeff because she knew how valuable his time was, and because she only felt comfortable asking Jeff to do something 2 or 3 times a year. Therefore, Heidi determined this particular request did not provide enough value for Jeff and did not warrant her connecting the two. Heidi's discretion in choosing when to leverage her networks ensures that when Heidi does make a request of someone in her network, they know it's important, and her requests are therefore much more likely to be acted upon. Now let's move on to the sixth principle, consistency, which revolves around people's natural desire to stay consistent with commitments, prior actions, and statements. Although this application of consistency is not what Cialdini had in mind when he described the principles of influence, let's again turn our attention to the Heidi Roizen case, where we see an interesting example of harnessing the power of consistency by simply being a consistent individual. Heidi, an undeniable leader and influencer in the technology industry, outright tells us that without consistency and performance, it's nearly impossible to have productive relationships. Supporting this statement is not hard. For example, earlier in the case, we learned of Heidi's ability to call in a favor from the major software CEOs proclaiming their continued affinity for Macintosh. This would not have been possible had Heidi not already been trusted and known for her consistency and performance. Finally, let's move on to the seventh and last principle, unity, which is the inclination for people to help those who are perceived as one of their own. In Give and Take, we learn how givers effectively utilize this principle through asking questions and seeking advice. By asking questions, givers build trust as they genuinely get to know someone and develop a relationship with them. Through seeking advice, givers develop a sense of co-creation as people feel that they have played a role in creating a product. Both of these actions develop positive feelings of unity, thus increasing a giver's influence through them. And with that, my talk is concluded. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me today, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.